Welcome to my talk, Beginner's Guide to Mobile Application Penetration Testing. Hopefully everybody's having a great conference so far. This is my first time at Day of Security. Will be my third time presenting this talk. So, who am I? My name is Whitney Phillips. I've been in IT and security for 12 years. I started off at help desk, then moved to system administration. This is where I got my kind of first start into security, picking up any sort of the blue team antivirus support or encryption. It was my intro to security. Man, I really want to do this as a full-time job. After that, I secured a job at a company called Whirlpool doing security operations. So I ran a global encryption project there. I ran their antivirus, their SIM, as well as their DLP. From there, I was more interested into the red team side, but I kind of felt like I needed to get there through a different avenue. Sometimes you can't just jump from blue to red. So I picked up a job at FAS working in the purple team, and that's where I did secure code review and kind of learned the insides and outsides of how a developer worked. From there, I had a friend contact me and ask me if I wanted to be a mobile penetration tester. This is where I got my start into red teaming and penetration testing. I worked for one company for about 4 years, focusing more so on drones and mobile apps and messaging apps. And now I'm at my current company, TrustedSec, and I work primarily on mobile application penetration testing, but I also do gray box testing as well. So kind of spreading my knowledge on the red team side and the pen testing side. And that's a little bit about me. So let's get into it. Yay. Why are we here? Well, I want to talk to you about mobile application penetration testing. I know, what a mouthful. This whole talk is going to be a high-level overview of different tools and techniques that I use in my day-to-day. Mind you, each one of these tools could be a whole talk in itself. And that's not to say that maybe in the years to come, I will break out and start talking about these individually. So let's go ahead and get started. So when you're doing mobile application testing, you want to start with a device. We'll go with Android first. You're going to want a rooted Android device. I personally use MAVSF. That's my favorite tool to use. It seems to be the easiest one. This one's very easy. There's also a lot of documentation out there. So I've been doing pen testing for mobile for about 5 years. And earlier on, there wasn't a lot of documentation out there. So this one's definitely good. Good starting point, good for beginners. And it also has some neat little tools inside of it that will help you in your mobile career. If you do not have access to a physical mobile phone just yet, you can use a tool called Genymotion. Genymotion is a mobile device emulator, and you can make devices and test with that. It's good for when I'm testing, maybe I'm testing different phones or different applications, and they maybe it's not just quite working on my physical phone. So I'll spool up a virtual device and then test on that. Here's another view of Genymotion. So this is your mobile phone. These are logs that you can get from that application. And it is free for the most part. But I think you could probably pay for more extended ones. It's been a while since I've had to use it. All right. So moving on, I'm going to kind of go back and forth between Android and iOS just because it's the easiest way to get my information across. So with iOS, Android were rooted, iOS were jailbroken. So obtaining a jailbroken iOS. So when you're wanting an iOS device, you're going to want to make sure that you're on a version that it can be jailbroken. So finding that, I guess, out of date phone is probably the best route, and making sure that your phone does not update. I use Uncover personally. It covers versions 11.0 to 14.8. There are newer versions coming out, and it's just kind of a cat and mouse game where as soon as a new jailbreak comes out, you kind of want to get your hands on a different phone and try to test that jailbreak. I have not personally used Checkran, but this one is another option. 12.0 and up, supports up to 14. Now, I talked about Genymotion earlier before. iPhone also has a virtual machine, except it costs quite a bit more money. It's called Corellium. Corellium, you kind of pay by the minute, but it does give you that jailbroken device. And if you're working for a company that can pay for it, or you're like on the buzzer, cannot get your mobile application audited, this is a good good resource to have. So a lot of times I'll get an application that maybe has a jailbreak detection. So spooling up something like this, I can test my app and I'm not cramped on time for testing. So jailbroken devices, we need a jailbroken iOS, we need a rooted Android phone. Moving on, once you have those two, you're going to want to obtain your application. So there's two ways to do this, or a few ways to do this. You can do it the way through Google Play for Android, or the Apple App Store for iOS. Now this is the more legit way. You're going to want to have account set up, etc. And that's like the best way, I guess, more secure way to obtain that application. Now, you could obtain those applications in a less secure way. iPhone cakes will provide what is called an IPA file. The IPA file is what iOS uses, and it is what is a term kind of like in Windows and exe. That is your installation file. This can be pulled from one of these websites like this. And then I think I lost my slide for Android. So I will tell you guys just verbally, Android uses APKs, same thing, just like the exe. It's an APK, and you can obtain that also from APK Pure. That's and I can type it in the chat as well. That is where you're going to pull down that APK, just like you would pull down an installation file like a Windows machine. So if I did not install it through the Google Play Store or the App Store, how am I going to get this onto my device? Well, for Android, and this is where I talk about every app can have its own separate talk, and then your mind might explode. So I've been doing this for so long. Android uses a tool called ADB. ADB is command line, and what you do is you take your APK, your Android install file, and you're going to push that installation to your device. So you'll have your device connected to your laptop, and you're going to push it too. That's why you need that root. iOS, a little bit more trickier. So you need Filza or Sideloadly, and that kind of helps you get that, bypass the Apple restrictions on your device that will get your application loaded without it yelling and screaming about certificates. The other option is using Xcode. Xcode is with Apple, and that is used to re-sign that IPA file. So hopefully you guys are all with me so far. I know it's a lot of information already so far. So next, we're going to talk about some tools that I use daily at my job, or just in mobile pen testing. So I briefly talked about ADB. ADB is supplied by the Android SDK Toolkit. So that would be your first step if you're primarily focusing on Android audits. This is something you would need to install, because this is going to help you get your software installed, pulling software off your machine or your device. So with ADB, Android Debug Bridge, ADB Shell will help you connect to your device. ADB Push helps push software or push files to your device, so into local directories. ADB Pull pulls from device to computer. And then ADB Install takes that installation file and then installs it on your device. Here's another example of ADB Shell. So using ADB Shell, this is used a lot on my end to get to the data folder. The data folder holds my application information. You need to be root to access that folder. So same kind of Linux commands. You'll ADB Shell in, you'll CD to your data folder, and then you'll SU to change to root. From there, you can kind of see the application and all the juicy details that might be in an installation. Another portion of ADB is Logcat. Logcat is going to run and capture the application at the low level and give you a lot of good input on how the application is running and launching. Next. So that is all primarily just with Android. So again, that Android, lost my place. Again, the tools, I would get that installed as your first line for Android. Next, I primarily use this for Android, but you can use it for iOS as well. MAVSF. So MAVSF is a static scanner that will take your APK and your IPA files and basically run a nice security report, and that will give you this high-level overview of the application, kind of some points to where to maybe start your audit or start your investigations. It gives you information like permissions, URLs, anything in the strings files. I really like it. It's free. It's open source. One of my favorite tools. It's kind of my first thing that I use once I first start doing my audit. So there's another picture of it. Again, I'm using Android because it gives me a little bit more information. Android giving you those permission files. All right. And I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit just because it's a lot of information to go over. So now I'm going to switch to iOS. Another tool that I use in iOS before I get anything started or any testing started is SSL Kill Switch. So what that is, that application is used to basically disable any sort of certificate pinning or attempt to disable any sort of certificate pinning that applications might have. What certificate pinning is stopping people like me or testers like me being able to capture or man in the middle that application traffic using like Burp Suite or something like that. So I use a tool called SSL Kill Switch, and most of the time that gives me the chance to capture and proxy that traffic. So that would be the next thing that I would install on my iOS device. So iOS doesn't kind of have that command line. I don't use it as much as I do with the ADB and the Android. Burp Suite. This one can be free and open source to users. I use this. This is my second line after using MAVSF. Now I'm going to test and see how the traffic is with the device. Where is the app communicating to? You know, at installation, does the app go out to a bunch of strange websites, or does it communicate traffic insecurely? That's kind of my go-to, my next step when I'm doing my mobile penetration testing. So hopefully you're with me so far. I think now we're going to get into a little bit of a more deeper tools if we haven't already gone deep enough. So we've kind of discussed a little bit of proxying traffic, a little bit of getting into our Android device. Next, we're going to go over Frida. So Frida is the open source tool that I use quite often. And I don't use Frida as much anymore. I use Objection, which I'll talk about in a few seconds. But Frida is needed to work for Objection to work. So open source memory dumping tool. It's used open source tool, and I'll go into it in a little bit more detail. I jumped to FreeDump. So FreeDump is the open source memory dumping tool that will pull any sort of strings or information from your application from memory. I use this to potentially grab usernames and credentials, passwords, emails, any sort of like keys that will get stored in memory. It's a good starting point on kind of what the application is doing. Back to, and I'm jumping around a little bit. So obtaining the IPA. So if you were to install the IPA from the iOS or the App Store, you can use Frida and Frida iOS dump to take a decrypted IPA file from that jailbroken phone. And then that's where you can start doing more reverse engineering and static analysis of that application. So again, still need that baseline Frida framework installed on both your computer and your phone. Frida is going to be used for both Android and iOS. Next, I have a tool called Objection. Objection supported on both Android and iOS. This is kind of my meat and potatoes of all my testing. So I use Objection to interact with the application, bypass the SSL pinning mostly on Android, dump keychains, perform memory leaks. I also like to bypass the jailbreak and root detection with Objection. So application pops up, says your phone's jailbroken. What it will do is I'll run my commands, and hopefully at that point it will stop that root detection from happening and then let me bypass through. So Objection commands we'll go through these pretty quick because, again, this would be a whole nother talk in itself. Objection commands, process name would be your app ID. You're going to explore. From the Android side, again, some commands that I use: SSL pinning disabled, root disabled, key store list to see if they're using the key store properly, and then hooking and searching for classes. This is a little bit deeper into objection. A lot of times this is used if my root disable might not be working, and we have to go in deeper dive and see where exactly might be the issue. So iOS, long list, NS user default, some juicy information sometimes gets stored in there. The same thing with hooking and listing classes. NS user credential storage dump. Check to see if they're using that iOS keychain. And then check to see if the cookies do not have, sometimes I've seen maybe tokens or credentials added into the cookies, which can be a not good situation. So one more tool for on the root side, I know I had mentioned in MAVSF being able to use other tools. MAVSF also has a root hide that will disguise you as a different application to bypass that root detection if objection doesn't work. Same thing with iOS. So my boss wrote this application, so it's pretty cool. I'm a geek about it. iHide that will bypass that jailbreak detection. Liberty Light, another jailbreak detection bypass. After you've had those applications pulled down, the next thing is in Android would be to decompile those applications. And from there, you're going to look at those applications and basically see what kind of things might be stored there. Malware, credentials, URLs, IP addresses, etc. You know, anything maybe that the developer might have left that could be wrong. And then the same thing with the iOS side. You're going to go and look at the package details. And to wrap things up, I think I've got 2 more minutes, some training material. So I do work for TrustedSec, so I'm going to post about this. Our blog is starting to come together quite well, but I will say the OWASP mobile security testing guide is a great way to start in your security testing field. That's where I go to a lot, and I generally reference it quite often. And with that, that's my presentation. I think I have 2 minutes to spare, and I know it was a ton of information, and I've got my information up here. So please write it down. If you want to email me, hit me up on Twitter, LinkedIn, more than welcome to. I can always answer tons of questions that way. So hopefully in the next few months, I'll be doing a more detailed parts of my talk.